there, Rub-a-Dub subs, it's Blackmetalwerewolf making a brand new video for you this week. And the subject I want to tackle today is, how suitable is heavy metal for kids? There's no doubt that since the very beginning of heavy metal, there have been plenty of people out there saying that no child with their impressionable young brain should be subjected to the horror that is heavy metal. Hell, chances are some of the people watching this video right now have heard that line at least once in their life. But how accurate is that statement? Should kids be sheltered from heavy metal? And does that argument even hold up to any form of scrutiny? So that's what we're going to discuss today. How suitable is heavy metal for kids? So to begin with, I think one of the main talking points a lot of people bring up when it comes to the subject of kids listening to heavy metal and why they shouldn't do it is that the themes and the language in heavy metal is just far too dark and inappropriate, and a kid should not be exposed to that. I know one of the main assumptions is that heavy metal is laced with nothing but horrible profanities. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of songs and people out there in the heavy metal world that do use some pretty strong language. But really, how bad is it? In my entire collection, which I'm going to say is just over 500 CDs, I don't think there's that many curse words in there in really the grand scheme of things. And that's just my collection. I'm willing to bet the percentage is less than half when it comes to overuse of profanities. I think, using profanities really isn't that big of a deal. As long as you use it within reason, you have a good reason to use it. Just saying fuck or cunt for the hell of it really makes no sense unless you're using it in the proper context. So don't get me wrong, I am willing to bet there are people who do use it in the wrong context or use it far too much. But really, I don't think what you'll find in heavy metal is more than what a kid would learn, say, on the playground at school. I know most parents out there view their own children as these marvelous little angels who can do no wrong, but I can pretty much guarantee you that they're picking up some pretty horrible things at school. And that's, that's just to put it in a regulated environment like a school. When you take them out of that environment, say hanging out with their friends outside, they can learn even more horrible things. Now there's no supervision. A kid can go onto Netflix or the internet and come across some really fucking horrible shit on there. And none of that has to do with heavy metal. You can take heavy metal right out of the equation and you can still find the same result. Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any band that uses it in excess to the point where even I think it's inappropriate. I do think there are some things kids should not be exposed to, but, someone saying fuck or shit, in the right context, I really don't see it as that big of a deal. So that's just the language portion of it. What about the dark themes portion of it? I'm a realist. I'm well aware that there are a lot of bands out there that deal with some pretty dark subject matter. And that some people say that this subject matter is just way too dark for a kid to deal with. To that I say, I think people aren't giving their kids enough credit. For example, when I was 10 years old, I was well aware of World War II. I knew what the Holocaust was. I could, grasp as much of an understanding of it as I possibly could at the time. And of course, the more you age, the more you can understand things that go along in the world. So the idea that a kid can't possibly deal with the subject of death, that's a pretty big topic in heavy metal. I think you're not giving your kids enough credit. I think kids can deal with a lot of this stuff. And also along those lines, you're kind of saying that your kid is too stupid to understand what he doesn't like and stop what he doesn't like. Even when I was a little kid, I could understand when I saw a TV show or a movie or a song that I felt wasn't right and I shouldn't be watching this or listening to it or whatever. I could just go to the next channel, turn to the next song, whatever, find something that I knew was suitable for me that didn't make me uncomfortable. So I don't think, kids are so stupid and so unworldly that they can't understand basic concepts like, death and that there are bad people in the world. And that's just kind of assuming that all heavy metal only focuses on death. And we all know that that's just not true. There are a lot of heavy metal bands out there that focus on so much more. A lot of bands focus on beauty and nature and all this kind of stuff. They just present it in a dark way. So I think that the idea that kids can't possibly comprehend dark themes is asinine, and you aren't giving your kids enough credit. Another point I've heard brought up is that the imagery shown on a lot of heavy metal posters, album covers, music videos, live shows, and those kinds of things are just way too dark and inappropriate for a kid to be looking at. To one point I semi-agree, for the most part I disagree with, mostly because I think most kids can understand the difference between fiction and reality. I think a kid could look at an album cover of, say, a Cannibal Corpse album and realize that that is fake and that is not real. And really the worst that could come of it is possibly getting a nightmare out of it. And really what kind of harm comes from a nightmare? It's really not that bad. You're, a kid kind of waking up in the middle of the night. Sure, it's a pain in the ass, but it's not going to destroy their psyche. I can understand that some people out there don't want their kids looking like metalheads, but really not all people who listen to heavy metal, have this stereotypical look to them. I think that's ridiculous to assume that they all look like that, or that if your kid sees that, he's going to want to become that. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people out there who do. I, for example, am one of them. When I saw a lot of people in heavy metal bands, I said to myself, I want to look like that, and I tailored my appearance to indeed look like that. But obviously not everyone who likes heavy metal does that. They have their own look and they don't look like a typical metalhead. So the idea that a kid will see that and want to become that is just a false assumption. It doesn't make sense. The only thing I can kind of semi-agree with the statement of not being exposed to inappropriate imagery is a kid knowingly be exposed to pornography. I'm strongly against that. I don't think kids should be exposed to pornography. In fact, I believe it's illegal in Canada and the United States to show that to a kid, as it rightfully should. So I can agree with that statement because it is very inappropriate. But really, how much heavy metal really explores pornography that graphically? Honestly, the worst I've seen in my album collection is, a picture of Rob Zombie's wife who's kind of scantily clad. And in one Rob Zombie album, there's a painting of a woman with her top off. Don't get me wrong, that is bad, and I don't think a kid should be looking at that, but I don't really consider that as hardcore pornography that you would say find on the internet. So, I do agree that kids shouldn't be exposed to that, but I just don't think there is so much of that in heavy metal that you should be worried your kid is going to be exposed to it. And I think a lot of people kind of win this mindset that kids shouldn't be exposed to this are kind of forgetting what it's like to be a kid. I remember when I was growing up, one of the best things in life was doing shit you knew you weren't supposed to be doing, listening to music you knew you weren't supposed to be listening to, playing video games your parents say you shouldn't play, watching movies your parents don't let you watch. You go to school, you find the one kid whose parents don't give a shit, you go to their house after school, you watch a horror movie, you play a really inappropriate video game. I think a lot of people have that experience at one point in their childhood, and it didn't fuck them up. They were just kids, they were having a little fun, getting into a little mischief, doing things, their parents said they shouldn't, but they do it anyway because it's fun and exciting. So I think a lot of people don't remember what it's like to be a kid and to have those moments, and I think those moments really define someone's childhood. I remember the first time I played the video game God of War, the first one that came back in 2005. One of my friends had it, and I went to his house, and my parents were so strictly against me playing that game, and I fucking played the whole thing at his house. And it didn't affect me the way they thought it would affect me, but I digress. So I just think that maybe people should kind of lighten up and understand that one of the points of being a kid is doing things that you're not supposed to. And I'm not talking about going out and boozing and hitting hardcore drugs and shit. I'm just talking about getting into a little mischief that your parents say you shouldn't. Now, I do understand that I am a bit of an outsider looking in. I am well aware that I do not have kids. I've never raised the kids. I do understand that raising kids is a ridiculously tough job. When you have a kid, it doesn't come with a manual. So I would like to get the opinions out there of a lot of people on this subject, especially people who have kids. If you have kids, let me know what you thought of this whole thing. Would you let your kids listen to heavy metal? Are there some bands you're okay with them listening to? Are there other bands you're not okay with them listening to? I'd love to get your guys' opinion on it. I'd also like to get the opinion of metalheads in general. When did you start listening to heavy metal? Did your parents really crack down on you when you were a kid about listening to it? In school, did you get a hard time by a teacher about it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to get your guys' opinion on the whole subject. So, like my past videos, I either do an album recommendation or an album warning, and today is another recommendation, and it is the Brutal Legend original soundtrack. Everyone knows I'm a huge fan of Brutal Legend, so I wanted to get the soundtrack, and I recently got a vinyl record player, and I was able to finally listen to this, and it is great. So if you're a fan of soundtracks, if you're a fan of Brutal Legend, if you're a fan of heavy metal in general, I highly suggest picking this up if you can. So that's it for today's video. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe, but leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of today's video. Check out some of my past videos and share them with a few of your friends while you're at it. If you want to keep up with me on a more daily basis, you can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. I also have a P.O. box open. All that info is down in the description. I still have a handful of the Halloween patches left, so if you'd like to get your very own, just click right over here. There's also a link in the description. Overall, thank you very much for watching, guys, and don't forget to stay brutal.